Welcome back to America Decides. It didn't take President-elect Trump long to pick his second choice for Attorney General once Matt Gaetz withdrew his name from consideration last week. He's asking former Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi to be his nominee. She defended then-President Trump during his first impeachment trial and has spent much of the last year running a Trump-aligned policy institute. We're joined now by Jasmine Wright and Shelby Talcott. Jasmine covers politics for NOTUS. NOTUS, News of the United States. And Shelby covers the same beat for Semafor. If you like your news yellow, you should go check out Semafor. You'll understand what you do. But good to see both of you. Thank you for being here. Happy Monday. One of those days where you kind of go, there was a lot more yet again. Let's start where last week kind of ended, Shelby, on Pam Bondi, because it's an important and a notable pick, obviously going to be a very high-profile position. Remind us where she sort of fits into the Trump orbit, why he'd want her around, and what we can anticipate she might do to run the Justice Department.
Yeah, she's been in Donald Trump's orbit really since the start. She was a top Florida surrogate in 2016. She was involved in defending him during his first impeachment trial. She was defending him after the 2020 election. She even went on TV and said that that they should prosecute the bad prosecutors who indicted Donald Trump. So that is something to watch as she heads into this position. But what was notable was I think a lot of people thought after Matt Gaetz decided to step aside that Donald Trump was going to begin his search anew. And in fact, he had an interview lined up with Pam Bondi at Mar-a-Lago that same day and announced it just hours later. So he clearly had her in mind as a second choice. She is seen as a longtime loyalist. And as we know, that is something that he is really focused on as he's picking these various people.
She's been around so long. Her political career actually traces back to a Sarah Palin endorsement. Like, you got to go back to the classics of the MAGA movement, the early origins, like the OG. the BT before Trump almost, because she's been around that long. And it was Palin that really helped elevate her, and then she latched on to Trump. Based on your reporting, how psyched are they about today's legal rulings?
Oh, they're extremely excited. I think that internally they were expecting it. It was just sort of a wait and see when this is going to happen as soon as he was elected. Even before he was elected, you know, we all spoke to people who said none of these are getting tried beforehand, and if Donald Trump wins, they're all going to sort of go away. They are extremely happy with this, but also anticipated it.
So, Jasmine, it's been nearly 3 weeks since Election Day. We have not seen or heard much from the Vice President, Kamala Harris. We know she's coming back from a few days in Hawaii. She's going to be here celebrating Thanksgiving in D.C.
Yep.
There has been a lot written in the last few days about her potential political future. You are one of those, though, perhaps most plugged into her orbit. What are we expecting that she'll end up doing next?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fascinating that a lot has been written about what she's doing, but we have not heard from the vice president yet. I think she'll be addressing supporters sometime soon to thank them for all of their efforts. Of course, that at the same time as all of the questions about how her campaign spent all the money that they've raised are swirling around, and certainly maybe not she, but people close in her orbit may have to answer some of those questions. But I think the fundamental question is one, what does the vice president want to do? And I think that is what is continuously unclear. I talked to somebody at the day of her concession speech who, after she gave it, they came up to me, one of her top aides, and said, does this sound like somebody who's ready to stand down? Now, it may not have, but the question is what she wants to do going forward. And also, what do the American people want from her? The vice president, I think, in her own party is not somebody that has always been popular. Certainly, I think people have been impressed with her run for office, impressed that she was able to do more in such a short period of time than anybody else had it, or maybe what they thought that she could do. But I think there are a lot of questions as to what the American voter wants, particularly because we know that the reason why Donald Trump had such a decisive win is because people wanted change, particularly on the economy. And is change is the vice president somebody that can bring about change in 4 years? I think that question is still unanswered. And so I think that there are going to be a lot of questions for the vice president to answer. One thing that I have heard from advisors is that they believe that the ramp for her to answer those questions is relatively short, and that if she were to do something, she would have to do it kind of quickly.
And she's also still got to invite J.D. Vance over to see the House and everything. Like, that's the next big sort of public reconciliation moment that we haven't had yet.
Yeah, and I think the vice president is somebody who likes to do those type of rules, likes to keep those traditions. That's why one of the reasons you saw her cross the stage and go shake Donald Trump's hand when people were asking if she would at the debate, because she likes to be that kind of forward person. And so we might see that moment. Of course, there are a lot of things that the White House does, that the vice president does, to talk to people during the holiday seasons. We'll see her engage with more and more. I could see more stories coming out about things that she maybe have said to certain people. But again, the question is what is the vice president thinking? And I don't think that anyone really knows that except for her, because she keeps her cards so close to her chest.
Well, if she'd like to talk about it, she's welcome to join us here, by the way.
You can call
just
me
putting
too.
that out there. Yeah, I can call Jasmine. Okay, fine. There are a handful of other Trump cabinet picks that are going to face some scrutiny. We could think of Pete Hegseth, who's the defense pick, Tulsi Gabbard to serve as the director of national intelligence. RFK Jr. may face some questions, or he may also earn some bipartisan support. How is the Trump team preparing for the scrutiny that's coming for the others now?
I think it's expected. You know, one thing I have heard is, and this is speculation internally, is perhaps Matt Gaetz stepping aside will help some of these other quote unquote controversial picks, because some of these senators who had problems with Matt Gaetz will say, okay, well, we got the win with him, so we'll give Donald Trump a win with maybe Pete or Tulsi Gabbard. But I also have heard the argument from Donald Trump's top advisors that essentially Donald Trump won the election, so senators should get on board and agree with his mandate. This is what the American people want. And almost taunting them in a way, saying, go ahead and try to vote against these people because you guys are up for re-election, sometime, some of them, in a few years, and wait and see what happens. So I think that they're prepared for a fight.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a testing period for the Senate to see how much leeway and how much room that they will give the former president. I was talking to one person who basically said that what Donald Trump is doing is putting forth all these people who he certainly wants to see in these positions, but they're so far right that even if Congress rebukes some of them, the person that they get in after that person, like Pam Bondi, would be what they call a compromise, but is not exactly a compromise because they're still so far right, even though they're a little bit less right than the first person putting forward.
Yeah.
But I think that the senators will have a real test on their hands, particularly one person I think that I've heard that stuck out in my conversations with folks is Tulsi Gabbard, and how that confirmation, now that Matt Gaetz has stepped down, that confirmation is kind of next on their list of a question mark.
By the way, you called it a decisive victory. You guys know that his margin, his popular vote margin, is now under 50%, right? Should they still be calling it a mandate if it's that close? I mean, they're less than 2 percentage points away.
I think the Trump campaign believes it's a mandate, no matter how close it is, particularly if he still wins a popular vote, which I think he's on track to. I think that they believe that they have a huge runway with the American people. Now, of course, I think that's going to be highly dependent on how the economy does over the next 2 years.
You call that a mandate, 49.9 to 48.3?
You know, I think they look at it in terms of, when I talked to Donald Trump's team, they won all of the swing states.
Right.
And so regardless of what these numbers ultimately end up doing, these were 7 swing states that Donald Trump was not expected to win all 7.
Yeah.
And so I think that's something also to keep in mind. And at the end of the day, is your average American voter focused on the percentage point 2 or 3 weeks out after the election? I'm not sure that they are.
No, they probably aren't. Well, call it a mandate, but don't call it a landslide, maybe.
There you go.
All right.
Yeah.
Jasmine Wright, Shelby Talcott, stop by anytime. Good to see you both.
Thank you.
And happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you.
All righty.